Okay, yeah, now we are recording, and yeah, I guess you can start now.
Okay, so this is the Grand Prix Attack, popularized on the British Grand Prix circuit, not the international one, because I guess it's a little bit too unsound for that. So the main idea is that you try and checkmate your opponent who's playing the Sicilian and messing around with moves like c5, nowhere near their king. So let's have a look at Carlsen against Ferrugia from last month. It was a bullet game, admittedly, but still demonstrates that even the top players can make some suboptimal moves. So let's see what happens here. So the first mistake that Black makes is they play d6, so move 2. Maybe you don't want to call it too big a mistake because it's move 2, but so d6 I think is a waste of time because really you want to play d5 in one go. But anyway, we'll see how that comes back to haunt Ferrugia. So Black continues to play their standard Sicilian things. Meanwhile, White has played the move f4, so they're clearly going to try and make an attack on the king side. So in some variations of the Grand Prix, the bishop comes out to b5, but on c4, it can target the f7 square and make attack like this instead of by doubling the pawns. So this is Carlsen's new move, pawn to a3. So a4 is another way of trying to give your bishop some space so that it doesn't get hacked off by knight a5. But Carlsen's new move, a3, also works. And we'll see how that also has an effect later. So now Black plays e6. And nice. So Carlsen drops the bishop back to a2 because he doesn't want to lose a tempo if Black plays something like d5. And also if Black plays rook b8 and b5 as they did. So Carlsen carries on with the classic Grand Prix attack plan of bringing your queen around to e1, then h4. And f5 is the real punch where you sort of open up Black's pawn structure. So here's another mistake by Ferrugia. He plays e takes f5, which opens up this line for the bishop against the king. And now Carlsen brings out his queen to h4. And already Black has lost it pretty much because there's very little he can do about this pin. The pawn on f7 is pinned. By playing e takes f5, he's also given up on playing pawn to d5, which would block this bishop. And this knight is going to become very hard to protect. So we'll see how Ferrugia tries to protect it. Okay, and now more pieces come in to attack this knight on e7.
And sorry, I have a question. Like in the earlier moves, like when you retreated the bishop into to a2, basically. Why does it win a tempo?
It doesn't win a tempo. It is merely prophylactic.
Prophylactic. But what if you kept it there and then wait for Black to play d5? What will happen exactly?
So that would be just as it would transpose. However, Black did not play d5. That was a big mistake by Ferrugia. So
yeah, I mean, I feel that this bishop retreat is I mean, it's I mean, if I was white in this position, I wouldn't retreat the bishop because I feel that I will do it anyway if he places d5 until he does. I don't need to do it.
Yeah, I suppose. But d5 is far and away the best move. So I think Carlsen was probably pretty surprised when he didn't see d5.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Nonetheless, I suppose he probably could have left it on c4, and we will see that in some future games. Okay, so where were we? Yes, we were seeing this knight getting attacked many times, and White just brings all of his pieces into attack on every line there is, pretty much. and black very quickly gets mated. Okay, so that looked good, right? Because, you know, move 19, black is mated. So we saw some of black's mistakes earlier on. Now let's see what would have happened if they tried the alternatives. So this one was, you should have played g takes f5. So g takes f5 might look scary because it opens up your king a bit. But really, if black plays properly, or if black, not properly, if black plays with as little fear as the machine, Stockfish does, then they can probably get away with it. So we can see some more moves maybe here. So queen h4, you try and make your attack. So in this instance, though, I have not played calm moves like Stockfish would. Instead, I have played some unsound moves. So bishop d7, it looks natural, but as you'll see, it's so things can quickly turn sour for black. So d5 was a move that I was thinking would be good, but of course it doesn't actually work because black can make all sorts of threats here, because knight takes h7 is a threat, or bishop takes g7 and then queen takes h7 mate. Or alternatively, if black could try to move b4, then very quickly. So these sort of quiet looking moves on the queen side, they although you think you're gaining space on the queen side or something, you're very quickly going to get mated. Here knight takes h7 is on the table. So although it's safe for black according to the engine, maybe it isn't so safe, and maybe even there are other engines that will be able to find something for white even. So there's still a lot of fun to be had there. So now we will. So this was Carlsen against Ferrugia. So the pawn going to a3 was the surprise move here, I suppose. And the difference between putting your pawn on a3 and an a4 is that now this knight can't come to b5. So as we see here later, maybe it would have been useful if black would play knight b5, but now they can't. Although if your pawn was on a4, you'd probably put your bishop on b3, and we're looking at one of the lines that we will see now. Okay, so can you see the new board? Okay, can anyone not see the new board? Okay, so here we will see lines where black doesn't mess up. So these are what are considered to be the main lines. So I think that these lines are actually pretty good for white. Maybe there were other people who disagree, but
wait, the board didn't
okay.
update.
Let's stop share. Okay, there we go. So here black will play the supposedly main lines. So e4, c5. So the same sort of things. Notice that black doesn't play d6, wasting a move. Instead, they're going to go straight for playing d5 by playing e6. So now here, white has some options depending on how confident they are in black not knowing what they're doing. But oops. But the best line is probably d3. Nonetheless, we can look at this small diversion through knight b5, which is gives black the opportunity to play d5. But of course, takes, bishop takes, and that is not a free bishop because, well, there's the fork on knight c7. So that there is potential to win a free pawn there, but of course, black isn't going to play d5. Instead, they'll play d6, and then white can play a4, a6, and the knight comes back to c3. Now it looks like black has just gained two free moves here, pawn to d6 and pawn to a6, because white could have just played a4 and it would have had exactly the same effect, and black wouldn't have had these two free moves. But these two free moves are pretty useless because the pawn is going to come to d5 anyway, and b5 isn't too much of a threat. Nonetheless, I don't think this is recommended because a6 might be useful. So I think it is probably better for black to just play for white to just play a4 in one move, as they will soon in this this line. So castles, knight e7, queen e1, castles, d3, d5, and now this was considered the main line. I'm sure there's people who are rethinking this now. Or I don't know when this was considered the main line, but I don't think it's very good for white, for black. So black plays knight d4, and you can take it, and you bring your knight to d1, not to e2, because from here it can come around to these squares, whereas on e2 it has less options. So queen e1 is actually quite important here, because now the d1 square has been freed for that knight. Black can try and trap the bishop, and you swap some pawns. And white still has a lot of potential for a kingside attack here with the f pawn coming up the board, and this knight will come into the game, and the queen can come to g3. This bishop is still on the board, so all of the sort of ingredients for white's attack are still there. So I'm not sure why this was considered to be okay for black. So I think the better line for black is to play knight a5 in this position, which causes white significant problems because they can't keep their light square bishop on the board. And that light square bishop is very important for tying down this f7 pawn later on. So in order to avoid this line, I think white should instead play pawn to d3 here, and then, well, white can still try and trap the bishop, but now there's this bishop a4 check move, forcing the bishop to come to d7, and then you can swap off your bishop for a bishop, which is still not great because this light squared bishop was never really too good, but it's not as bad as swapping it for this knight on a5, I think. And of course, this isn't too bad for white because maybe you swap off black's worst bishop, but their knight is on a5, their king is in the middle, so there is definitely some potential here. So if instead in this position black, oh no, this was part of a different line. Okay, so so instead of castling, you can play d3. So many of these lines, of course, transpose because the order of you castling and playing d3 can often lead to transpositions. So now knight g7. So now black is ready to play d5. Again, noticing that they didn't waste a move playing d6. So white can play Carlsen's move, a3, and keep their bishop, because now knight a5, well, does nothing. D takes e4, and okay, so here white has their nice center, but maybe the queens will come off. So okay, black isn't getting mated here, so I think this is probably one of the better lines for black, but again, playable for white. Of course, knight takes e4 might be a mistake because you're letting this knight come to f5, and that is an important theme that we will see more about in the next game. Okay. So of course, white could also play a4 here, and then after knight a5, the bishop comes back, so knight a5 would be a bad move. After d5, you simply drop your bishop to b3, and very similar position. So the difference between a4 and a3. So here, black will have to waste an extra move on trying to play b5 because you have an extra attacker of b5, but once they do, maybe it will be more dangerous because there's no pawn in a3 stopping the pawn from coming to b4. Although maybe you do want to spend that extra effort on stopping b5, because once black does play b5, then this pawn will also come to c4 and block in this light square bishop. So that is, I think, probably one of the big arguments for playing a4 rather than a3. But Carlsen's a3 is creative. Okay, so we will now look at the next games. So here we'll look at another, so similarly to the Fallujah game where black ends up getting mated, having not mated in this case, but yeah, ends up losing because but not through making any obvious blunders. So e4, c5. Okay, so it's the same classic stuff. Again, this d6 move, which is essentially just giving white a free move. Okay, so the queen comes out to h4. This is just as we saw in the Carlsen game. And now, so knight a5 would probably be black's best move here, but even now it's too late already. They wasted a move on d6, and now they will face the consequences, because this f5 move will really force black to think about things, because the f6 is a threat. And if g takes, then the black king is open, and that g takes is almost always the best option. But now, of course, bishop h6, and maybe black is in a bit of trouble. So, but if black, doesn't think anything is happening and just plays a6, then f5, and all of a sudden everything is falling apart for black. So if they play e takes f5, there it's the same concept. Okay, they can take as many pawns as they want over there, but we're gonna just pile on the pressure onto that e7 knight, and okay, white can win this easily. So those were some lines where white gets everything, or not everything they want, but so there are some lines where white gets most of what they want. There are some lines where white gets everything they want and basically just wins on the spot. Of course, it still requires a fair amount of creativity, because black won't make the same mistakes every time, and you have to be able to decide whether to play bishop h6 or bishop g5, because bishop g5, of course, piles pressure on this knight, but bishop h6 will try and get rid of this bishop, which is the only piece defending the black king, really, and well, except for this knight. Okay, but and the knight will come into g5, and black will have trouble defending. Okay, so in the next game, we will see black putting up a lot more resistance. Where are we looking? So this is a grandmaster playing against me in the world and the university's rapid championships. So again, decent player. You think who would make these sort of strange moves, but okay, it's GMs, I guess. So he tries to play Sicilian. So he plays e6. So he's going for the faster d5. And the important thing here is to note is that, okay, if you play bishop c4, then the knight comes to f6, and then black can get this quick d5 in, gain a tempo on the bishop, put some pressure on this e4 pawn, not necessarily waste time fianchettoing the dark square bishop, and okay, black can maybe develop some pieces quickly, and that's not ideal for white. So instead, I think the optimal way to play this is white is to play like a Dutch reversed, and now you could just carry on your development. And of course, there is still some pressure with the f pawn and the e pawn, while black has this sort of pressure on the queen side with the d pawn and the c pawn. But I think I'd rather have my pressure on the king side. So so white keeps his light square bishop, and so importantly, another thing to note is that when this knight is on f6, it cannot come to f5. So white is now freer to play pawn to e5 and not expose that and the f5 square is less vulnerable. And of course, against tempo on the knight. In other lines, if you play e5, this is not recommended, because you want to be playing f5, not e5. You want to get this bishop out. So, okay, right. We make some more moves. And now we see that although it wasn't maybe quite as fast as in some of the other examples, white has still managed to get their attack going. They've got these pawns here ready to go, and white had some trouble defending, so they play some more sensible looking moves, and very quickly they find that they are getting very near to getting mated, and of course I end up throwing it, but that is besides the point. Okay, so that is a start on the Grand Prix Attack, where we saw black castling in all of those games. Maybe next week we'll look at what happens if black thinks that they can keep their king in the center, which is also not recommended. So main takeaways, if you're playing as black, play d5 in one move. try and get their light squared bishop off. Main takeaways if playing is white. The f5 punch is what you're going for, and if they do go for that quick d5, then you need to be able to bail out and just play a Dutch first, and you will still get opportunities.
Hi. When I play against the Grand Prix and also the McDonald attack, I think it's called the McDonald attack, when you go e4, f4 after c5, I always like encounter problems when they push e5. And
So tell me some moves. E4, c5, knight c3.
yeah, that's the Grand Prix attack. And also there's the McDonald attack where you have e4, c5, f4.
Okay.
It can transpose to each other, but anyway, my point is that when in that setup, when they push e5, I often find it problematic.
For
That's why I
black
like.
or white? So black pushes e5.
I don't know. White pushes e5.
Oh, white pushes e5. So if you put your knight on f6, then you are vulnerable to white playing e5.
Yeah.
Again, though, you can drop your knight back to maybe any available square, like a d7 maybe. So by playing e5, white has lost a lot of control over the f5 and d5 squares.
Yeah.
So maybe it's not ideal for white. And also you can try and play d5. Like there's those lines in the Scotch Gambit as well, where white pushes e5 and black just counterattacks immediately with d5, hitting a bishop on c4. So there's also potential for that. If the knight's on e7, then and they play e5, then you can play h5 even to try and really clamp down on the g4 square. But mainly I think they've just lost control of that 5 square, which is not how they wanted to be attacking. Another thing that I would say about playing e4, c5, f4 is that then black's, I think, definitely their best move is just play d5 straight away there. Because after e takes d5, your pawn on f4 just starts looking a little bit awkward. In fact, there's lines where you could even play e4, d6, f4, and then on move 2 you play d5.
There's also there's also the Tal's Gambit, which is basically to play after d5 you play knight f6 instead of retaking the pawn with the queen.
Yeah, sure. Okay, any other questions?
Okay, if there are no more questions, I'm gonna just stop the